On this Tuesday night, Drake's Toronto mansion becomes a crime scene. The security guard shot outside the Canadian rapper's home.
He was standing outside of the gates in front of the residence.
The investigation and what part Drake's feud with fellow rapper Kendrick Lamar may have played in it. Stormy Daniels testifies at Donald Trump's trial, what the adult film star revealed about their encounter and his payment to keep it secret. Israel takes control of the Rafah border crossing in Gaza.
This morning is one of the darkest in this 7-month-long nightmare.
What it means for the flow of critical aid and where peace talks stand. And sweet dreams are made of this.
We promote added value.
The push to tap into Manitoba's maple syrup.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. An investigation is underway after a shooting outside the Toronto mansion of Canadian rapper Drake. The motive is not clear, but it happened days after another rap superstar, Kendrick Lamar, released a diss track about Drake. The two artists are locked in an intense, ongoing feud that plays out in their music. And then early Tuesday morning, a security guard was shot outside Drake's lavish home in an exclusive neighborhood. Police say they are aware of the musical feud. What's not clear is whether it's now escalated into real violence. Mike Drolet has our top story tonight.
This morning at about 2 a.m., police were called to a shooting at the residence behind me here.
Police didn't need to say who lives here. Tucked safely behind a 4.5-meter-high wall, the residence in question is owned by rap superstar Drake. The shooting involved one of his security guards who was standing outside the front gate and who remains in hospital with a gunshot wound.
I cannot confirm if Drake was home at the time the incident occurred, but I can tell you that we are in contact with his team and they are cooperating.
Who did it? Police aren't releasing details of the suspects or their vehicle because of poor video quality. They also aren't speculating as to motive, but they are very much aware of the ongoing feud between Drake and rapper Kendrick Lamar.
Say, Drake, I hear you like I'm young. You better not ever go to cell block 1.
Since March, the two rap titans have gone back and forth with increasingly disturbing allegations of domestic violence, pedophilia, and cultural appropriation.
I was really trying to keep it.
A third rapper, J. Cole, was involved as well, but bowed out as the threats escalated.
I don't know if y'all can feel that, but the world want to see blood.
Even Saturday Night Live is paying attention.
When Kendrick describes Drake as Canadian, that's because Drake is from Toronto.
Instant gratification. People are waking up first thing in the morning trying to find on the internet what the latest response is.
Rap battles, says DJ Ron Nelson, have mostly been publicity-driven, although the most famous feud from the mid-90s ended with the deaths of Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G. They can get personal, vicious, and aren't for the faint of heart.
The thing about hip-hop, though, is it's uncensored music, right? This music is not being released on vinyl. It's like the whole mixtape series where there are no rules. You can say anything you want.
Is the Drake-Kendrick Lamar battle real? If the shooting last night had anything to do with the feud, it is now. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
The woman at the center of Donald Trump's hush money trial gave explicit testimony today about what she says was a sexual encounter with Trump, one he paid to keep secret. Trump, who denies any such encounter, is charged with falsifying business records to hide a payment made to Daniels so she would not publicly share her allegations before the 2016 presidential election. Jackson Proskow reports on what she revealed and why it matters.
Sitting in the same room as the man accused of buying her silence, adult film star Stormy Daniels testified in graphic detail about an alleged sexual encounter with Donald Trump in 2006. She described first meeting Trump at a golf tournament and testified she was eventually invited to meet him at a hotel for what she thought would be dinner. After conversation in the hotel room, Daniels said she went to use the washroom and returned to find Trump sitting on the bed in boxers and a t-shirt. The intention was pretty clear. Somebody stripped down to their underwear and is posing for you, she said. After a consensual sexual encounter, which Daniels described as brief and unprotected, she said she tried to move on. She testified she faced at least one anonymous threat to keep quiet.
Hello, how are you? Hi.
When the infamous Access Hollywood tape dropped right before the 2016 election, Daniels said her publicist suggested she sell her story. She said she eventually learned Trump and his lawyer Michael Cohen were interested in paying her $130,000 in exchange for her silence, which was the best thing that could have happened, she testified, because then I'd be safe and the story wouldn't come out.
They have no case.
The salacious details are the backdrop to a case that is strictly about alleged business fraud. Trump denies the affair and claims payments made to his lawyer Michael Cohen were not reimbursement for the money Cohen paid to Daniels.
The legal expense that we paid was put down as legal expense. There's nothing else you could say.
Trump's defense team moved for a mistrial, arguing Daniels' testimony was prejudicial. The judge denied the request. Under cross-examination, Trump's lawyer asked Daniels, "Am I correct that you hate President Trump?" Daniels replied, "Yes." "And you want him to go to jail?" the lawyer asked. "I want him to be held accountable," Daniels replied. Whether Daniels' testimony makes or breaks the prosecution's case isn't clear, but in the court of public opinion, the most scandalous accusations could hurt Trump's standing, especially with conservative voters. Donna?
Okay, Jackson in Washington, thanks. 3 Indian nationals accused of killing a prominent advocate for Sikh independence made their first court appearance in BC today. The men, all in their 20s, are accused of first-degree murder in the shooting death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. He was killed in the parking lot of a Gurdwara in Surrey, BC last June. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said there is credible evidence India's government was involved. India denies that. Today, India's top diplomat in Canada spoke publicly about the case. Eric Sorensen reports.
Heavy security around the provincial courthouse in Surrey, BC, as 3 Indian nationals charged with murdering Hardeep Singh Nijjar made appearances by video link. 11 months ago, Nijjar was shot and killed outside a Sikh temple. The 3 men, in Canada on different visas, were arrested in Edmonton last Friday. In court, their cases were adjourned till May 21st. Several dozen supporters of Nijjar were inside and outside the courtroom.
People just want to be here and show their support for not only Hardeep Singh but also for the overall movement for Khalistan, that that India is trying to scare people into kind of cowering by this assassination, and I think they just want them to know that that won't happen.
Nijjar was an activist for an independent Khalistan. To Indian authorities, he was a terrorist. The RCMP made it clear last week that India is a central part of their murder investigation.
And these efforts include investigating connections to the government of India.
The allegations have ruptured diplomatic relations. India's foreign minister stated that Canada is India's biggest problem when it comes to Sikh separatism. And India's High Commissioner to this country echoed concerns about those who've become Canadian citizens.
The foreigners having, if I can call it, evil eye on the territorial integrity of India, that is a big red line for us. My concern is national security threats emanating from the land of Canada.
But for Ottawa, the issue is this.
Canada's position has always been clear. Our job is to protect Canadians, and we stand by the allegations that a Canadian was killed on Canadian soil by Indian agents.
Another minister, Harjit Sajjan, says the case has made him and his family a target of misinformation by India. He defends the Canadian police investigation.
I know that Sikh Canadians right now feel very confident in their police forces of the ongoing investigation at this time.
India's envoy said his country is ready to sit down and resolve the diplomatic rift. But there is little that political leaders can resolve in a murder case that is now in a Canadian court. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
6 Canadian children held at a Syrian detention camp are back in Canada tonight. Global News obtained this photo of the children. They're holding a sign thanking their family's lawyer. The children and their mother were being held in northeast Syria after the area was reclaimed from the so-called Islamic State. Their mother, who's from Quebec, had been denied entry to Canada. Her lawyer says she's since left the detention camp. It's unclear where she is now. In Gaza, the Israeli army says it's taken operational control of the Palestinian side of the Rafah border crossing to Egypt, choking off a critical aid route. Troops rolled into Rafah after a night of deadly airstrikes. Israel claims its ground operation there will be limited, but its army is now everywhere in Gaza. And as an Israeli tank crushed an I Love Gaza sign, the message is that the ground assault will not stop until Hamas is destroyed and the hostages returned. More than 1.4 million displaced Palestinians are sheltering in Rafah.
An assault on Rafah would be a strategic mistake, a political calamity, and a humanitarian nightmare.
Crystal Gamansing reports on the Israeli offensive and whether diplomacy can do anything to stop it.
Israeli forces took control of the Rafah border crossing and raised their flag, a symbolic move ordered by the Prime Minister as ground forces entered the last untouched area of Gaza. Military pressure on Hamas is a necessary condition for the return of our hostages, said Benjamin Netanyahu. With this latest military operation, humanitarian groups warn of even worse conditions for the more than 1 million displaced Palestinians.
The two main arteries for getting aid into Gaza is currently choked off.
Monday evening, it appeared as if a ceasefire was near. Hamas said it agreed to a deal presented by Qatar and Egypt. Israel rejected the notion, saying the deal was not what they had last presented, but committed to continuing talks.
If the only way to get the hostages back is by providing an Israeli guarantee to end this war, then end this war.
As hostage families rally and beg for their loved ones' safe return, Canada and other countries continued calls for a ceasefire.
We need to make sure that hostages be released. We need humanitarian aid to go into Gaza.
Officials from the United States refused to comment on reports that it paused delivery on a shipment of munition to Israel. Speaking at a Holocaust remembrance event, the president reaffirmed support for Israel.
The security of Israel and its right to exist as an independent Jewish state is ironclad, even when we disagree.
The U.S. is against a large-scale military operation in Rafah. Israel's defense minister was on the ground and warned that's exactly what could happen if Hamas doesn't return the more than 100 hostages. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Vladimir Putin began his 5th term as Russian president with a ceremony at the Kremlin today. Russia's political elite were invited to the lavish inauguration. Putin first took office nearly 25 years ago. He then changed the constitution. His new term won't expire until 2030. Then he's eligible to run for another 6 years. In March, Putin won an overwhelming majority in stage-managed elections. Opposition candidates in Russia have been killed, jailed, or gone into exile. Ukraine says it's foiled a Russian plot to assassinate President Volodymyr Zelensky. 2 Ukrainian colonels tasked with protecting top officials have been detained. They're suspected of treason, accused of being involved with the plan drawn up by Russia's Federal Security Service. Ukraine says the plotters had aimed to use a mole to get information about Zelensky's location, which they then would have attacked with rockets, drones, and anti-tank grenades. The military unit that carries out Canada's most sensitive and dangerous missions, the Canadian Special Operations Command, has a new leader tonight. Global News obtained exclusive access to the ceremony in Ottawa today, where Major General Steve Boivin handed over command to Brigadier General Steve Hunter. Both government and military sources tell Global News General Boivin will now command all domestic and foreign military operations. TikTok takes action. Coming up, how it hopes to stop a potential ban in the U.S. A tornado ripped through this small Oklahoma town overnight, destroying dozens of homes and toppling trees and power lines. At least one person was killed. 2 others are missing. This is the second twister to hit that town in a span of 5 weeks. Authorities say at least 17 tornadoes were reported in 7 U.S. states overnight, and warnings are still in place tonight for millions of Americans in the Midwest. TikTok and its Chinese parent company ByteDance are suing the U.S. government over a law that could force a nationwide ban of the app. The lawsuit was filed less than 2 weeks after a bill was passed that would force ByteDance to sell the social media app or face a ban in the U.S. TikTok argues the law is unconstitutional. It sets up a legal battle that will determine whether U.S. national security concerns take priority over the free speech rights of 150 million American TikTok users. High hopes for Boeing's first crewed trip to space were dashed last night after a last-minute issue with a valve.
The vehicle is not in a configuration where we can proceed with flight today.
The NASA mission was scrubbed 2 hours before it was scheduled to lift off. Astronauts were ready and waiting when a faulty rocket valve was detected on the launch vehicle. It is another setback for Boeing. The Starliner has already faced years of delays. The mission has been further delayed until at least Friday. Fighting foreign interference ahead, diaspora communities weigh in on Canada's plans to tackle it. Members of several of Canada's diaspora communities are concerned about the federal government's new bill intended to counter foreign interference. It includes a foreign agent registry and changes to legislation governing Canada's spy agency. David Aiken takes a deeper look at what people are worried about.
Thank you for joining us.
The bill tabled by Public Safety Minister Dominic LeBlanc Monday has several measures to combat clandestine foreign interference, a foreign agent registry, new criminal code offenses, and an expanded role for CSIS to protect diaspora communities. Measures, some say, are welcome if overdue.
These changes and these amendments are coming almost a year after the unprecedented assassination of a Canadian citizen.
Lawyer Prabjot Singh represented a coalition of Canadian Sikh groups at the public inquiry into foreign interference. He likes the bill's requirement that security agencies will now have a mandate to share interference intelligence with city councils, universities, businesses, and community groups.
That has been one of the consistent calls from within the community, is that the only way to combat foreign interference effectively.
Good morning.
Gloria Fung speaks for a cross-section of Canadian diaspora groups who met with MPs on the issue last week.
At first glance, the proposed act looks good and strong.
That's correct. In fact, I got 2 briefings.
MP Jenny Kwan told the inquiry she's been a victim of interference by China, and she thinks the new bill will help counter that.
The legislation in and of itself is not going to address all of the concerns for foreign interference activities. It's one tool in the toolbox, which is an important tool that the NDP has been calling for a very long time.
The key now? Get the measures in place quickly.
I'm concerned about the timing of its implementation.
The bill has to pass before the next election, and it has to be in effect before the next election.
Finally, some have complained that Ottawa seems to place foreign policy objectives ahead of the security of Canadians at home, and it's not clear any legislation will reverse that perception. That's really something that could take a culture change inside government. Donna.
Okay, David in Ottawa, thank you. The federal government says British Columbia's request to recriminalize the use of illicit drugs in public spaces has been granted. The changes take effect immediately.
Moving forward, any kind of pilot like the one in BC, we know that we have to have a balance. Public safety and public health. That means there needs to be sufficient health services in place, scaled out to meet people where they're at, and also law enforcement to have the tools that they need to ensure that public safety is a priority.
BC had a 3-year criminal code exemption for personal possession of small amounts of drugs like heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamines, and using in public areas like parks had been allowed until today's change. The overdose crisis in BC continues to claim a staggering number of lives. The BC Coroner's Service says 192 people were killed by illicit drugs in March. 84% of those deaths have occurred not on the street, but inside homes, shelters, or other indoor spaces. Sweet times next, how Manitoba is tapping into the maple syrup industry. It hasn't been a sweet year for Canada's maple syrup industry. Statistics Canada reports production hit a 5-year low. A warm winter means less sap is running, and increasing demand means Quebec's syrup reserve is dwindling fast. So a new player is entering the market. Melissa Ridgen takes us to McCreary, Manitoba, 3 hours northwest of Winnipeg, where the sweet season is well underway.
Maple syrup gets its very own weekend-long festival in McCreary. While most don't think of the pancake topper as a Manitoba delicacy, syrup is king here. And the king of kings is Bob Gass.
These are good, about a half.
He taps 1,000 trees on his property.
That's really good. That one's particularly sweet.
While his operation is among the biggest in the province, Manitoba doesn't even make up 1% of Canada's maple syrup production. But it could. Or maybe should.
Well, if it weighs a ton,
with warmer weather affecting eastern production, Manitoba often gets a longer spell of freezing nights and warmer days, conditions needed to produce sap.
Oh, yeah.
Add to that, the Manitoba maple tree is different than the sugar maples and the red maples out east, and make for a different, some might even say better, flavor.
there's a difference. So most of us in the business like the darker syrup. But of course, it's got to be quality, of course. It can't be burnt or anything like that.
The Maple Syrup Festival offers an opportunity to teach and inspire others to get into the business, something Gas would welcome.
The potential is there. The biggest holdup we have is not a lot of folks doing it at a commercial level.
With production struggles in eastern Canada and the national syrup supply dwindling, Manitoba's agriculture minister sees an opportunity.
We promote added value, and we definitely maybe to put some serious thought. Opportunity knocks, let's make it happen in the province of Manitoba.
For now, though, Manitoba's maple syrup is mostly enjoyed locally, of course on pancakes, but also in lattes, rolled in snow, and in desserts.
The winner is number 3, and it is maple cheesecake.
Gas hopes by the time the sap runs next spring, more Manitobans are tapping into trees and setting up sugar shacks to cash in on liquid gold. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, McCreary, Manitoba.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Fries, and we'll stay in Manitoba for tonight's Your Canada. This red fox relaxing in Winnipeg. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.